what we've done over the past week is we've worked with this thing called metric systems, right? And we worked with powers of 10. So when we went from kilometers to meters, what we did was we times everything by 1,000, which means we move our decimal to the right 3 spots. When we moved from meters to centimeters, we multiplied by 100, which meant we moved our decimal right 2. When we moved from centimeters to millimeters, we had to multiply by 10, otherwise known as moving to the right 1 spot for our decimal. Now, when we dealt with millimeters to centimeters, what we did was instead of multiplying by 10, we divided by 10. Which means we are moving to the left 1. Then when we went from centimeters to meters, we divided everything by 100, which means we moved our decimal space to the left 2. And again here, we divide by 1,000, which means we take our decimal and move it to the left 3. So remember, when we were dealing with metric systems, all we did was move the decimal left or right according to our chart. The next major thing that we decided to look at was a thing called perimeter. Now, perimeter really meant the outside border. The outside of a shape. Some of you guys said that instead of the outside of the shape, you said the border of a shape. Now, specifically, when we were looking at something like this, a rectangle, let's say I had 3 and 2 for its sides, the perimeter would equal 3 plus 2 plus 3 plus 2. So you'll notice that there is a repetition. Of those lengths that you were adding, and that's because of the matching sides here. The 3 on the top matches the 3 at the side, the bottom side, which is also 3. The 2 on the right side here also represents the 2. That represents the length of 2 on the other side. Okay? And that's what we've done with our perimeters. We also took a look at something that looks like this. We called this a triangle, right? Now, the triangle, for its calculation, its perimeter is just 5 plus 4 plus 3. So we just add those up and we end up with 12. Now, that's what we've done so far. Now, after Tuesday's class, we also took a look at a thing called perimeter. Area of rectangles. And we started off with area of rectangles. And what we did was we took our rectangles, which were described as length and width, and all we said was our area was equal to length times width. An example of a calculation with distances is given as this. So let's say I had 5 and 3. My area is always going to be length times width. Now imagine that this was centimeters. What we would do is we would say our length is 5 centimeters and our width was 3 centimeters. We multiply 3 and 5 to get 15, so we end up with 15 centimeters squared as our final answer. Okay, and you'll notice when we did these problems, there were 3 parts: the equation, the calculation, and then the final answer. All right, you'll notice that you can't type this on the computer. So when you do a quiz for me or something online, just give me the straight number. But if, which is this part, the number part, 15, if you didn't have that, if you were able to write it by hand, you would write centimeters squared for any area. Now, the next thing that we did was we took a look at the area of triangles. So remember the area of a triangle. So let's say I have a triangle that looks like this. I say that its height is 5 meters and its base is 10 meters. We said the area of a triangle was base times height, and then we divide it by 2. So you look for the base, the bottom part of the triangle. We'll call it B times H, and then we divide by 2. And all we do is we look at our triangle's base, and in this case, it's this part, our 10. So now we have 10 times 5 divided by 2. You punch that in your calculator, and you end up with 25 meters squared. Now, just like I said before, you will always get marks for your equation, your calculation, and then your final answer. So, on to today's lesson. Can anybody tell me what this thing is? That was part 4. This is part 5. What is this thing? Anyone? What is that? I'd love to know. Anyone? Okay. Call this a circle. There are 2 types of circles that you will see. This one is called type 1, where we have a point in the center and it goes out to the edge. We call this the radius. Now, another type of circle that you will see is given by this shape. Here's our center, but we have a line that cuts across the entire length of the circle. We call this the diameter. Now, that's all you need to know. Okay? Now, based on these two things, we have our first concept of the day called circumference. Now the circumference is the outside border of the circle. Now when you think of a circle and we have circumference, there are two equations that you have that you can use for them. We have this one. Ready? C stands for our circumference, meaning the outside perimeter of our circle, which is 2 pi. So 2 times pi times r. And then for our second equation, if we had a circle that looks like type 2, the equation of our circle is C is equal to pi times d. Now remember, this d value is the diameter we were talking about in our circle. And this part here, r, is our radius for our circle. All right, so I've only given you a taste of what you're going to be working on today. But if you didn't finish any of these other topics that we worked on for the first 3 days, I want you to make sure that you complete them, because at the end of the day, there are 2 quizzes. 2 quizzes I want you to do. You can take them as many times as you want.